I want to bring in Richard Haass. He is the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, also the author of Foreign Policy Begins at Home, the case for putting America's house in order. Richard, let me ask you this. Based on the tone of Secretary Kerry's statement, which he made just an hour ago, which was a tone we frankly have not heard before, the strength of that tone, very powerful words on Syria, is it safe to say it would be shocking if the U.S. did not take some form of military action?
Secretary Kerry went far out on a limb, both in the content and, as you say, John, the tone. So, sure, I would frankly be surprised and then some if the United States now did not, probably together with a few other countries, take some military action.
What kind of action would you advise? You have written that a cruise missile attack you think would be the way to go.
Yeah, something that did not put American aircraft within range of the fairly extensive Syrian air defense system. So you're probably looking at sea-launched cruise missile, probably some airborne cruise missiles, but something along those lines I think would be the most natural sort of response for the United States to launch at this point.
And we have doubled our capability in the region with 4 warships as opposed to 2 now near Syria. A senior administration official tells CNN that any strike that the U.S. might conduct is not meant to topple Assad simply because the opposition won't be ready to take over. So the question here is, why bother? Is some kind of attack, even with these cruise missiles, as you suggest, really anything more than a therapeutic bombing?
Well, actually, I think it's quite important for 2 reasons. One is chemical weapons have been used. It is important to underscore the principle, the norm, the taboo that these weapons ought to have, that no one, Syria or anybody else, now and forevermore, should be able to use such weapons, much less biological or nuclear weapons, with impunity. Secondly, the United States said that any use of such weapons would constitute a game changer, would cross a red line. And any time you throw down a diplomatic gauntlet, your words have repercussions, not simply for the immediate situation, but in this case in Iran and North Korea and around the world. So I think it's essential that the United States act. That said, I don't think we ought to be getting involved centrally in the Syrian civil war. I don't think the United States should become a protagonist in that situation. If we want to help the opposition, the best way to do it is through considerable arming of those elements of the opposition with agendas we can support. So I think there's an important distinction between what we need to do to signal our unhappiness over the use of chemical weapons, but also to put a ceiling on what we're doing so we don't get enmeshed in what I think could become a quagmire.
You talked about the tone of the statement from Secretary Kerry, the language he used, undeniable. He called it a moral outrage. He also said that to deny that a chemical attack took place would be cynical and amounts to a cover-up. There is one powerful nation that is saying it sees no evidence of a chemical attack. That's Russia. So the question is, what kind of message is the Secretary of State now sending to Russia with his words? And could this even further damage U.S.-Russian relations, I suppose, if that's even possible?
Well, the relations are, shall we say, in the deep freeze. What I think the Secretary of State was signaling to Moscow is that we're simply going to bypass the United Nations Security Council. And the United States will find potentially other organizations, be it NATO, the Arab League, or will simply put together an informal grouping of nations, a so-called coalition of the willing, that will support this effort both diplomatically and militarily. So essentially, if Russia wants to stick to this, what the Secretary of State properly called essentially an outrageous position, it will find itself diplomatically isolated and on the sidelines.
It was a model the U.S. used before when it attacked in the Kosovo conflict in the late 90s. Richard Haass, thanks so much. Great to have you here. Appreciate it.